I'm sure it's a catch-all, that there's things in there that were probably earmarked for it, but if you made it 75, so be it. And then you end up with,
Didn't we used to have, Mr. Chairman, let's just take hypothetical, like, uniforms like 20,000, right? We had for 2013, and we project 20,160 for 2014. Didn't we always have a line like this? This is projected what we did in 2013. Did we really spend the 20,000?
we have that, we have the actual.
I understand, but I don't have it in front of me.
With uniforms, I can tell you
No, I'm not picking on uniform. I'm just giving you a hypothetical thing. In other words, let's go just so we don't get anybody excited here. Apparatus fund is 24,000. Well, no, I don't want to go near that because we never know on that. But like maintenance, right? We projected 90,000, and we may well have spent the 90,000, maybe more, and then we project 92,000. I think it would be good that if we had it written up that the people could see that, well, we projected 90, but we only spent 80, so we really don't have to go to 92. So nobody down the road can always say, well, why'd you go to 92? Let me see what you really spent last year.
Well, we have that. Every month, John gives us a breakdown of where we are by line
But
item.
we don't have it here for the
We
budget
don't have
for
it
the
here.
people.
I don't have it in front of me.
It's in the regular meeting, in the treasurer's report.
Like in the treasurer's report in the regular
I can
meeting.
give you that, Ray. It'll take you through September.
You know,
I'm just saying, once we do this, okay, there's going to be people that may be watching home, I don't know if this is live or taped, it's going to say, well, what about this, what about that? So if we cover all the bases now, we won't run into that problem. We have long, drawn-out meetings with a lot of discussion that doesn't look good for the board. So if we know, I'm just taking anything, I'm not saying anything is wrong here, I'm just saying if you had shops, we said 5,000 we projected, I wasn't here last year, but anyway, it was projected 5,000 for 2013, we project 6,000 this year. Well, maybe we need it, but maybe we spent 4, or maybe we spent 5 and change last year, so we project we're going to need 6. That's the only thing I'm saying, so that people have it up front. Transparent, that's all.
yeah, but what we've done, and I know that we've had a couple of meetings you weren't able to come to, but we've done at the meetings this year is John presents a bank reconciliation, and the bank reconciliation ties by line of where we are spent year to date.
I understand that, and he does an
Right, so
he does
I
an
have it
excellent job.
I have it in front of me.
What I'm getting at, you have it in front of you, the people out there, the people at home don't have it. So
That's true, but it was at the meeting, and it's, if they want it, but I agree with you. So is there any
when you come
specific?
to the budget, they're going to say, well, you spent 17 million, 16 million. We got to show them this is why we had to do it. I mean, we can always leave extra money in a fund that we can legally move. We all
No, I agree,
understand
and
that.
for the purpose of what we're doing as commissioners, is there any specific line item that you want to know with the number that we spent so that we can make further decisions tonight, like you
I
mentioned?
understand that too, but it's, first of all, I would like to, being that Commissioner Baker is new and he wasn't here, I think we should give him, before we approve this evening, the opportunity to be here to give his input on it.
No, I agree.
And secondly, I think that why don't we just do what we think we know about at this meeting, but maybe at the next month, we can have what we actually spent, what we didn't spend, and this is why we're raising the monies for the taxpayer. And this way, there'll be no bickering, well, I didn't see this. You know what goes on here a lot of these meetings. We can stop it now. The big thing was, we're going to be more transparent. That's my only thing I have to say. So if we're not going to really make it the final thing tonight, if we have more time to do it, maybe we can pick up some of the loopholes we have here tonight, because even though all these things are brought up at different meetings, a lot of the people don't watch it every meeting. They're going to watch it when the budget comes. It's going to hit their pocketbook or their wallet at home. So that's where we're going to run into a major problem, maybe. That's my only feeling. If the majority wants to go down the other road, I have no problem with it.
I think tonight would be the ideal time to
Discuss this.
discuss and pass the budget tonight. I think it's, I just think,
Oh, let me ask you a question, though.
So here are some of the big things that we didn't spend last year, okay? So in other words, we budgeted and didn't spend the allotted amount. Fire training, education and travel, repair and maintenance were actually $15,000 less than we budgeted last year. Insurance, we were $22,000 less than what we budgeted last year. Hospital, we were $153,000 less than last year. And that's it. Those are the big ones. Everything else is minor.
So that was about 200,000 there, right, in round
Yeah,
numbers?
right. So, yeah, you bring up a good point. Coats, boots, and helmets. We didn't spend $30,000 of that last year. That was budgeted.
No, but we did the first day of,
Problem is,
it arrived, we had this desire to buy a whole bunch of new boots, and the new boots arrived in January and were billed out in January or February.
No, it wasn't just, it was all the gear, the bill was from December, it just didn't get paid until January, and it
And it blew
looked like
out-
we were
it blew out
over
our
budget
line this
before
year.
we got anything this year.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that, you mean we're going to see that in 2014?
Yes.
Okay, I got you. Okay,
So, yeah, so that's what that was.
So he's actually got all that stuff on its way in once we cleared that up.
So,
but I mean, we have it, so I mean, if you want to look at it, because we got to make a decision today.
We have to make the decision to pass it tonight?
Yeah, or else it could reverts
Well-
to the old one.
before we pass the budget, we have to make a decision to go over the tax cap.
That I
Before we move on the budget, if we have a desire to go over the tax cap and our budget appears to be over the tax cap, we'd have to have a vote on the tax cap. And then after the vote on the tax cap,
But if we vote on the tax cap, that means you're going to shut a fire station, do away with 4 firefighters. What
well,
are we
I'm
doing?
saying if you vote,
According to your email.
Vote for the tax.
if you vote to impose the tax cap, then your next conversation is how do you take $500,000 out of today's budget? And so, in order to take $500,000 out of today's budget, there's only limited ways you can do that. And you have a contract in place to pay the employees a certain amount. You can't change that.
I understand that.
So then it's, okay, how many employees are you going to have at that rate to generate that kind of number?
I understand.
And so, that's what you'll have. So that's where we are, and, that's in a nutshell. I don't think going through each line item on this budget, which we did at the September meeting, you're going to generate $500,000 in savings. I don't think you're going to generate, other than removing half of the contingency, which on a $16 million budget is not a lot of contingency for a fire department. I don't think you're going to find that much. And as far as funding overtime versus hiring people, if you ended up with employees who, for whatever reason, you had employees that you could, in the ideal world, have people cover overtime, cover slots with overtime, and not cover your overtime slots with people out sick. So if you took your overtime slots and only covered intentional overtimes to fill a slot you didn't fill. In other words, you left a slot blank and filled it exclusively with overtime and used your overtime exclusively for that, it would clearly be cheaper than hiring a fireman. Clearly, in my view. It would be that much cheaper. The battle you run into,
But then you would have to put a rig down, would I be correct?
no, I'm just saying as a general rule, but you're not going to have $500,000 extra in the overtime budget if you go with the tax cap. Your overtime budget's going to go down to, if, was it 400 and change now, it's going to go down to, it's 575, your overtime budget's going to go down to, $150,000 to cover the captain's
I never
floats.
said I was against going over the tax cap. I just want to make it very clear for the public so they understand all different directions we have to move in.
Yeah, so,
So you're saying there's no way that we can come up with 500, reduce it by 523,000?
well, you can reduce it by $500,000 in a heartbeat. But if you do, you have to change your level of service you're providing today. There's no, That's the balancing act. You want to change the level of service, which means you have less manpower run on a given tour,
And less rigs on service,
less rigs in service. Now,
which is very dangerous, in
it's,
my opinion.
yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act. It's what you want to do. You can reduce it in a minute.
See, that's why years ago, I always wanted to put a couple of people on and then leave enough for overtime, not to go let us go in the predicament that we are in today, where you were always fighting me and against that. I'm not here to cause trouble. These are things you have to look for the future. That's why, before I came on the board 14 years ago, the people had the foresight to make sure every year when Chris Cade was here and all the other commissioners, that they put X amount of money every year, because you know the trucks are going out every single day being used, that they're going to wear out in a hurry. And you have to have money in there, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And then you still have to wait a year, most likely, to get that piece of apparatus in. So there's a lot of things, sometimes you can't jump too quick and make statements, because now you put the people in the fire district in a tough bind. And if I have to go over the tax cap to protect the people, then I will do it. And the firefighters, I will do it. Drop of a hat. I don't mind getting the
John? I'm
So
sorry.
it's just, you want to take a vote then, on the tax cap?
No, we have to open it up to the public before we do that.
Just one thing, Dennis mentioned it earlier about how we fund the certiorari's in-house. If we went to a bond, okay, you take that 400 and whatever number's in there, and you take it out, because you wouldn't have any effect in this year's budget, and you'd pay it over 10 years. I believe it's 10 years, so I don't know the exact number. So there's other ways, but it's a change in policy, and it could be, depending on interest rates, it could be more costly.
That's right.
Okay, so, that's something else.
Very true, John.
So I think at this point in time, does anybody, any more board comments?
No, I just think if we can,
Mr. Baker will be here in 15
yeah, I'd like to
10
get
minutes.
it at 5 or below 5. It seems like with this contingency number, we can probably do that.
Right, I guess I'll recap. If we reduce firefighter salaries by 125, we increase the certs by 50, increase now we're not overall increasing the budget, so we're allowed to do this, as far as increasing the the election referendum to 15,000, and then that will reduce the tax levy by 66,000, and additionally, we reduce the contingency by 131, 796 minus 7500 by 56,769. So we'd have to do a little math, John, on our budget. So that'd be 56,769. That'll bring us under roughly 5% by a little bit.
So you're going to reduce contingency by 50, say that number again?
56,769. That'll make it a $75,000 contingency.
Okay. And that's like 30 basis, approximately. I don't have a calculator here.
Right, that's what I'm coming out with.
$16 million budget, it's 30, 35 basis points. And that would
Correct.
take it, with the loss in assessment, to 490-ish.
490 is before the assessment, 4%. Just above 4%.
Yeah. Doing everything else that's there, plus that.
Before the cert change.
So we do the math now?
John, you want to run a calculator, John, and play with the math?
You need Excel or anything?
No, he can. John will figure this out. In the meanwhile, we can open the meeting up to the public to,
I think, let me ask you a question. I think Commissioner O'Hara asked it. Does this also include the new hirees, if you're going to hire it for next year?
it includes us having the staff of a complement of 75 firemen, I believe. I think that's listed in the,
That's the slate, yeah, 75, yeah.
yeah, it's the slate. And I think of those, 4 would be newbies, or
Yeah, that's what we budgeted. With the 4 open slots,
4 open slots.
new firefighters, not
Right.
experienced firefighters.
Right, and then if you get four new firefighters, your downtime on 4 new firefighters is probably 5 months before they actually, are on their own. They go to the academy for 3
You
months.
won't see them on the line until July.
Yeah, you won't see them on July, and you'll be hiring them sometime in probably February or March, January or March.
The hire date would end up being around March, the start date.
Start date March?
Talking about the CPAT orientation December, practice January, CPAT in February, which tells me they'd be anticipating a March date for a start of academy.
CPAT is an agility test the county runs. All candidates who are on the civil service list that are eligible to be interviewed, we invite them to go to CPAT, and they go through the agility.
Well, it's part of the Westchester County's setting up the list, the civil service list. They use a form of a CPAT for an agility.
Right.
The state still has to come down and conduct the CPAT certification at the end of the academy. The county just uses the format of the CPAT as their agility test.
So we have to get our candidates in that CPAT process if we plan to hire anyone early next year. If we miss the CPAT process, the next CPAT they run will probably be in the fall if they run one. So you're limited to hiring
Incur
people.
the cost of sending individuals, which last I heard was around $7-8 grand a person.
Yeah, you could send them to a training academy upstate New York, which we prefer to just use Westchester County.
Okay, would that change?
Yep.
3.99.
3.99 plus
Right.
88 gets you to 4.87.
Very good.
Okay, so we want to open it up for the public? Anybody else want to open for the public? Anybody like to address the board? Mr. Wolf?
Good evening, Chairman Winter. My name is Thomas Wolf. I'm a resident of the town of Eastchester, and of course, being coterminous with the Eastchester, New York Fire District, also resident. Mr. Baker, good evening. Just a few points. If we're going to make adjustments to the budget this evening over and above the reductions of 66,000. I understand we're going to make another reduction of 56,769. I would make a suggestion that we allow Mr. Melisardi to calculate these things on spreadsheets to make sure that he has these things down pat, so when we know precisely what the figures are that we're going to pass, you're going to pass for a total amount, and what the actual percentages are and everything, that because he'll have to adjust these calculations here, and that way we make certain that we don't make an unintentional mistake. I see Mr. Melisardi shaking his head in affirmation. And just one other minor thing. If, as we all believe will happen next year, the election is moved from the second Tuesday in December to the general election day in November, I appreciate the fact that the amount of money that has been set aside for the running of the election has been increased, but even at, what, $15,000, I don't think that that's going to cover it, since we're now going to be going from, what, 5 polling places to 16 polling places, and we're going to be going from having the polls open from 2 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 at night to having them open at 6 o'clock in the morning to 9 at night. And so I think there are two multipliers in effect there, one going from 5 to 16, and the other at least twice the number of hours. It's going to be open, going from 7 hours to going to 15 hours. And of course, we'll have to pay for a little bit extra there. Actually, it's 16 hours that'll have to be paid for. So I would ask you respectfully to consider that perhaps some monies will have to be allocated from contingency to...
Right, exactly.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. No disagreement that the contingency line might get tapped there.
Good evening, Sean Stewart, President of Local 916 and resident of North End of Eastchester. I just have a couple of quick questions, and I would like to thank John today. I was working and had some questions on the budget, and he helped, as you noticed, every page had a lot of questions, and he helped answer them. But a couple of them stick out, and first of all, when we look at, just bear with me if I can find it here, we have line 106, attorney. We're going from 30,000 to 36,000. And then if you look at labor consultant, we're going from 83 to 84. Now, aren't they one and the same? I'm not against what they're getting, but it's basically $120,000. Aren't we paying one law firm that figure?
Yeah, well, we have, if you know, as you know, in the past year, what we've decided to do is combine all the legal work into one law firm, and that has proven to be, has so far been a pretty excellent decision on our behalf, I think. It's worked out well for us. The law firm seems to have a staff of people to handle almost anything we come up with between election law, budget issues, construction law, litigation with, franchise contracting we're negotiating, employee disputes that you're probably familiar with. They seem to be right on top of their game. They're very efficient. They get back to us generally very quickly with response. And through their efforts and their diligence, we've been able to realize some significant savings. I know one case in particular where we had one 207A member that we took off the fire department's payroll based on their successful litigating the case. So that's all worked out. Now, whether we need two line items or one odd line item, they do the labor work and they do the legal work. We could combine them. We've spent a lot of money this year on legal bills to catch up because we have a multitude of problems, and it's been consuming a lot of my time and the board's time, and just researching these issues. Just the night ship issue alone has taken an extremely long time to go back 20 or 30 years and research things and get up on, and when you explain some of the issues we're having to these lawyers, they look at us like they just think I'm crazy when I explain the issues that we're having. But they've worked through them. So, I think we're going to be at that level of expense, whether it's labor or legal. We'll be at that level until we knock these issues down, and then I think our legal bills will pretty much resolve themselves.
Well, no, like I said, Dennis, I'm not against it. I just noticed, again, you have attorney and you have labor consultant. They're kind of one and the same.
They are one and the same.
So,
they are pretty much one and the same, but we're using, we regularly communicate with probably 5 different lawyers at that law firm.
But overall, our legal fees compared to last year are a little bit less.
They're not that significantly different than last year, and I can say what production we're getting relative to our legal fees is light years different.
Like I said, I'm not questioning. I know there's just a difference, like you said, with the attorney, you're going from 30 to 36. It's only 6.
Since we don't have a district attorney any longer that's incurring a $18,000 a year cost, we're able to take that money and put it through the firm and help us with these.
Oh, no, like I said, you're missing the point. I just didn't know why we have two separate lines. Put it into one and just call it.
No, and I agree with you, and I'm just using what you're speaking about to leverage the fact that overall, legal fees.
I think
Okay.
we've had the
No,
two
then that's
lines
a good thing.
years, and
it's
once it settles, we've always had this too.
Okay. Also, I noticed, we'll just stay on that page, and then I got two more questions. I know the chief wears a lot of different hats, and it's been brought up before. I mean, I don't see any room here for a human resource person. I know the chief is very busy. I mean, we've dealt with a couple of personnel issues in the last week or two, and I know he's been very busy, and it's eaten up a lot of his time, and we're trying to work a few things out. Has there been any talk looking down the road, because this way he can concentrate on firefighting and not whether it's night shift, whether it's
Workman's comp.
X, Y, or Z?
Agree with you 100%, Sean. There is no, right now, we're going
He
through.
needs help.
Right, agree with you 100%. Right now, we are in the middle of triaging. This whole year's been a triage effort of catching up to issues, and with John's help, Mary Lou Falcone's help, Doug Melazari's help, we've been knocking these, no, Doug, I forget his last name. Sorry, John. We've been triaging these issues down and dealing with the law firm to triage them down, and we've been transferring too much onto the chief because we have been. And so we really, there will come a point in the near future, as soon as Station 5 gets done, which we're hoping it's a month away, that we'll have time to really focus on restructuring how we process human resources in that front office. It couldn't agree with you more. It has to get reprocessed, it has to get changed.
Okay.
So our priorities on the first part of the year were the CBA.
Right, no, I understand. I'm just,
Now we're going to move over to.
at least you're thinking about it. And I noticed under, salaries, you got captains, lieutenants, uniformed firefighters. I think which might help you gentlemen and maybe the public, like if you had to break down, for example, we have 5 captains, what their pay grades are, lieutenants, same thing. I know with captains and lieutenants at this point, I think they're all senior officers, so they're all about the same salary. But when you get down to uniformed firefighters, you have first year, second year, third year, fifth year, then you have, 10th year. In the past, that was broken down that way. That might help people with the budget, because when they say that number, I know the number Dennis had said is 75, but it doesn't really show that with the captains, lieutenants, and uniformed firefighters. Just a better breakdown. That's something.
Yeah, we can do it by their seniority, because they do switch after 5 years, then they jump.
I'm
The big
just saying
jump
it would
is after
help,
16.
because you mentioned the number 75, and then people look at that as, what is the...
Well, that's including captains, lieutenants,
Right.
and fire.
But
That's
you do have it broken down. You have captains or X amount, lieutenants, and then uniformed firefighters. But in the past, you used to break it down even a little further, that like a junior captain made X amount, but a senior captain made this amount until they came off probation. Same thing with a lieutenant.
It's more important what he's saying, not so much captains and lieutenants, they're all around the same. You might get somebody that has.
I'm just saying
But
it
with the
breaks it down.
firefighter positions, it will make a difference. As you lose the senior firefighters, as you bring them in at that starting pay, and it shows the progress. So if we lose a few, which we're anticipating, then the replacements would be at a lower scale, but that changes each year until primarily, all the firefighters are primarily at the same rate. Yeah, we have, I'm going to throw out maybe 9 that are not at fifth year yet.
Yeah, between 9 and 12, roughly, in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay. If you go to page 2, we have 302, outside services other. I know for 2013, we had roughly 25,000, and then for 2014, we have 12. When you mean outside services, that's a good savings. You cut it in half. What is the other outside services?
Like we had a small period of time.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, John. Okay, hold on, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. All right. And the last 2 things on the budget. I know the overtime budget for 2013 is roughly $530,000, and we have $575,000 for 2014. Now, my question to the board is that actual true number? Because again, with your contract that we have that's in place, you have contractual overtime. For example, we get 2 training days a year, and contractually between the captains and the lieutenants, they have overtime built in. So is that factored into that overtime? If it is, it's not really a true number, because if you're paying out roughly, I'll just use the number, $175,000 in contractual overtime, then your actual overtime number for the year is only $400,000, which...
You are correct.
Let me just finish, and then I'll hear what you got to say, Dennis. And when we had met in the spring, from roughly last October to the present, I've never seen something like this in 23 years I've been on the job. We've had a lot of injuries, illnesses, catastrophic on and off the job for whatever reason. And I understand that ate up a lot of the overtime. I don't know if that's a true number, A, and if that's enough to cover us, God forbid something happens. Doesn't mean you have to spend it. And it's just a concern of ours.
Yeah, you are correct. There is, if we'd had nobody call in sick and nobody get ill, which is probably never going to happen, but if we had no one ever get sick and no one call in ill, we would eat up some number of overtime. In other words, if everyone worked every scheduled day, I'm trying to say, there would be a matter of overtime that would get used up to fill contractual needs for float days and for
Training days.
Training day. Well, training days is up to. We can redefine print, but it's up to. But there is some amount of time that will be filled in overtime that is not to replace people who are unable to come to work because they're sick or injured or something.
Right, that happens.
That we understand that, right? But yeah, overtime is one of those items that's just a struggle. I mean, it's a struggle for the board to worry about whether you're raising taxes 5% and building it up. It's just that's where the give and take is, I guess.
Okay. Again, you think you understand where I'm coming from. It's not really a true number because you got contractual numbers in there.
Right. I understand it. I don't know if I understand it because I've studied the contract to no end and I kind of know how this works. But I can see how people miss the fact that the overtime is really money that has to be spent to feed the contractual needs.
Right, okay. And lastly, under that, I noticed looking through the draft and what John just handed out, we have no line for fire prevention. There's no line whatsoever.
We do have one.
It was there, but
Unless it evaporated and went to contingency.
Well, just hear me out. I spoke to Lieutenant Tom Pintaval in fire prevention, and there's 2 of them in that office, and they're very busy. And he gave me an outline of what the bare minimum would cost for the year, whether it's for fire prevention supplies, annual updates, fire prevention week, memberships in seminars, code books, and when they do these safety days, there's overtime involved. And he gave me a breakdown on what it would cost to run that office, which, again, I don't know, if you take the overtime.
I remember this right, it's about 20,000, what was that number there?
The number is roughly $23,000.
$20,000, yeah. Now, we should mention that his salary and the salary of the lieutenant and the firefighter appointed there are in the salary lines above them under firefighters. So they're not funded. Then the question is, do we... and this is a good point, because right now we know the schools, the Bronxville School, Tuckahoe School, the Eastchester School, building familiarization. We're going to start having fire prevention, I guess, and the membership on Saturdays walk these buildings to get more familiar with the buildings. The Bronxville School in particular, because they did a lot of construction, a lot of changes, they've reached out and asked us to make sure we're totally familiar with the building, and I think it's scheduled to do that, and this weekend or the following weekend, they're supposed to walk that building, and I'd fully encourage Lieutenant Pintaval, whose office is phenomenal. I mean, Those two guys have done a phenomenal job organizing their office. If anybody wants to see how record keeping should be done, that office has got it down unbelievably well. So they are doing a phenomenal job. They are carried in the front part of the budget, and their supplies and equipment and their overtime is not that material relative to our overall budget, is my point. There used to be a separate line for fire prevention in the budget, and with John...
We used to have fire prevention materials. It's
There was.
Fire prevention materials.
John, what happened with that?
Do you have
I
a
mean,
line for that, Commissioner Napolitano, Jerry? Is there a line in the budget?
No, I'm looking.
Oh, well, see, now this gets back to my overtime line. Now, it doesn't sound like a big deal, but based on what Lieutenant Pintoval, Tommy Pintoval put out, overtime for him and the firefighter assigned to the Bureau for stuff that they do for the year is roughly $11,000.
The two of them.
For two of them.
For two of them, yeah.
Right. But then again, you're taking that out of the overtime line. Like I said, I understand overtime is a touchy subject, but then that further decreases that line. It doesn't show the true value because now we don't have a fire prevention line and you're taking $11,000 out of the overtime for the rank and file that work around the clock. And again, it's not saying they shouldn't make overtime, but it's not a true reflection, and there should be a line for them for that.
I got that
And then
completely.
the other part of that, Dennis, which again, that's the overtime, their materials roughly, according to Tommy's numbers here, are roughly $12,000. It's $11,670. So, and you have to find a place. Now, I know John had the contingency number, which is probably, that's a good place to take it from. And just basically to finish up, I don't think you should knock that number down. I think maybe you should increase it a little. I know it's going to be a tough pill to swallow, but it's how we do business in the fire district. And with that, I think you should override the tax cap because you're kind of cutting bare bones when you start playing with numbers here and there, especially with fire prevention, because that office has taken off the last couple of years with Tommy in there and with Larry Vitarello. They've done a fantastic job. So that $22,000 or $23,000, again, if you knock the contingency line down and you're going to need money for the election, you're $75,000. Now you.
That, they get funded, the way they operate, just so we know, just so people understand why it is what it is, they work straight days. In our world, that's 8 in the morning to 4.
8-hour day, correct.
8-hour days. So they work straight days where our typical fireman works 24-hour schedule once every 4 days. So in fire prevention, they work straight days, and their overtime is roughly $5,000 a year, each, $5,000 to $6,000
The number
a year.
Tommy gave me is 11,000.
Yeah, the average fireman makes about $10,000 a year in overtime for the year, roughly. That's just a generic number.
If we had what just happened in the last 10 months, because me as a senior firefighter, I haven't made that much since in the 23 years I've been here. Yes, the last year and a half I've gone over that number. I can show you my tax returns and my checks and my W-2s, but again, it's based on we had a very rough year going back to last September, October, and even the year before that. So it's not a constant thing that gentlemen firefighters are making 10 grand every year. Some make more, some make less, and it's also based on your availability. So I don't want the public getting misled that every fireman is making that. I know I'm not. I've been here 23 years coming February. I've probably only hit that mark maybe 2 or 3 times in my entire career. And I'm pretty available and I live in town. So you just got to be careful when you say that because that's not really true.
Sean, I think he's referring, it's an average number.
All right, average
It's an
number.
average.
It's a typical, to me, that's a typical number, right? I think I have them in my head, most of these numbers.
Okay.
So, but with fire prevention, one thing that happens is the schools do events on weekends, and so there is a need for them to have them on weekends, or the school will open up for a function on a Saturday night, and they'll need somebody to come by and be in the building when they have it. And so fire prevention's a perfect one to do that. As far as this time of year, this is Fire Prevention Month, so he's visiting all the elementary schools, handing out the comic books, handing out the hats, teaching, drop and roll, and all those things. So he's extremely busy. So I agree with you 100%. There's nobody who doesn't think they're doing a phenomenal job. But I don't think they've been crimped on funding as far as, I don't think they've called and said, hey, I couldn't get this done because you guys didn't give me the overtime or didn't give me the money or didn't give me, we haven't done that. And so, but I can see your point, there's not an individual line item on here, but
Like-
they feed off the general budget and we've been funding them as appropriately.
Like, I can give you a copy of what he gave me, but for, like, example, when he did the overtime adjustment, he has overtime for himself and firefighter Vitorello, and then there's different, for example, Waverly School, Ann Hutch School, Greenville, Cottle, ICS, Chapel School, so we don't take a rig out of service. He has figured out that if you hired one firefighter overtime for 4 hours, which is 6 hours pay, and you put a spare engine or truck in service, so you're not diminishing your services, that would be covered on, and that's also covered under the 11,000 that he's talking about. So it's not just all their money, it's taken into consideration, not taking a rig out of service and putting a spare rig in service to help them out with these events.
We had it in 2012.
Yep. Yeah.
It was under travel and firefighter expenses.
That, I'm just trying to bring that point out. I don't think that's,
No, you bring up a good point. I'm just trying to figure, maybe John could tell us where it was absorbed.
and
We
again,
didn't
the-
purposely pull it out, is kind of what.
right, but again, the overtime number isn't just for Tommy and Larry. The overtime number is certain events where you would hire an off-duty firefighter to come in for the 4 hours to help either one of them. So you're not taking a rig out of service. You could put a spare engine in the truck, which again would help the chief administer better fire protection and service for the district, which wouldn't tie his hands if you start running out of money here or there. Again, it's just an
Show me that
example
again.
of what they do.
You want it again?
Yeah, show me where you are. Fire training, what do you have for fire training there? Fire
You're
training.
looking at 2012?
Yeah, 2012-30. I'm looking at 2014 here. Travel and miscellaneous, 10,000. What's travel and miscellaneous? See travel and miscellaneous there? You don't see travel and miscellaneous, where's,
Well, it's all travel, fire training, which is going to include travel. Dennis,
what's that?
fire training is going to include travel.
That's a separate line here.
Again, even if you didn't increase a line, if you left the, where is it? I gotta find
I'm
it.
looking for that line.
If you left the contingency expense alone,
Education, travel, minutes, so
or maybe increased it,
What do you see?
That line doesn't match.
We dropped it. We didn't want to do that.
or what if you make,
Six. Well, 6, we doubled it, that's fine. Sean, I
what
see
if
your
you took,
point.
all right, what if you took the contingency, you made it 75, make it an even $100,000, that'll help you with fire prevention.
What'll happen though,
election.
Sean, in the end of the day? We have enough money in the general fund that if we ran into a problem, we could move out of the general fund and deal with that.
Okay.
So I don't think our budget is material off. Yes, could we fund him by having a line saying $20,000 fire prevention, dump up the budget 20 grand, which is, 10 basis, 15 basis points or something. I think we're better off just going as is. But it's well noted, but he's not for lack of, well, there's no lack of funding for his
Right,
position.
I understand that, but I just, maybe now, moving in the future, after 2014, you would put a line in there.
We used to have a line in there. We had a line in there up until, John Meyer probably moved it to contingency on us, and that's where he was.
But anyway, that's just my personal view, and that's, looking at the budget, and I appreciate the job John did. Again, I took the time to talk to him today, and as you saw, I had a lot of highlighted items, but he explained it to me. These are the ones that stuck out, and
Yeah, so there's no intention to reduce the fire prevention budget. So
okay,
it's just-
that's fine. And like I said, my personal opinion as an employee and a taxpayer is to override the tax cap and keep it the way it was, but I know you guys have a tough job to do, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anybody, Mr. Wolf?
Excuse me, I just want to make sure I understand something. Line 108, having to do with auditors, specifically 108A. Now, I see on the audit that O'Connor's Davies did, which has just been released, that audit and accounting fees were budgeted at $50,100 for 2012, for the year ended December 31, 2012. And for 2013, there's a budgeted amount of 108A, line 108A of $50,100, same thing. And for auditing, and I'm not quite understanding the breakdown here, but it seems that the total amount for 108 for auditors and so, whether it's 108B included also, is $16,500. And in actuality, for the ending of December 31, 2012, almost $44,000 was spent for auditing and accounting fees. I don't quite understand how we're going to bring it in at $16,500 next
I'll
year.
attempt to answer that, and John's got his hand up to answer it as well, but I'll attempt to answer it. When we went out for an RFP, early this year in February, I think we advertised our RFP for an auditor. We also advertised for an RFP for an auditor this week for next year. Rather than waiting till next year, we started that process earlier. We waited until O'Connor Davies, Munson and Dobbins issued, and then we went out for an RFP. So we just went out this week for an RFP for next year. Last year, O'Connor Davies, Munson and Dobbins came in at $16,500 for the audit work for 2012. So that's where the $16,500 number came in. They used to do accounting, budgetary, and other items for us, which was approximately $50,000. I think that's where that, you can
And so
answer.
that's 108A should be named accounting?
John, you want to answer that? You can answer it there or here, doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, it might be picked up better if you go there.
So it's just a case of labeling?
They used to assist the fire district in their reconciliations, some of the prepared reports they did. We don't have that now. The only thing we're paying them for is through the year-end audit. That's why it's a changed number. It was lumped into that number.
So 108A is really accounting?
Yeah, I guess you could call it accounting, but that's the name, that's the account name.
They didn't want
That
to,
was the total for them last year.
yeah, and I don't think they wanted to bill us accountants and then bill us as auditors at the same time. So they always managed to bill us as auditors with other services, but they never billed us as accountants and then billed us as auditors. So now we're not doing that. They're either just doing the auditing and John's doing the accounting.
All right. So the feeling is that this can be done for 1/3 of what it was before. Mr. Napolitano is shaking his head in the affirmative. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm just going to recap just slightly. I know it's redundant, but Mr. Baker was out for a few minutes, unable to get here. But John, we had a long discussion, and we went through the budget line item, and there was a suggestion that we reduce firefighters' regular salary by $125,000. We increased the certiorari by $50,000. We increased the election line by to $15,000, up $9,000, and which would give us an overall tax reduction of $66,000. That would bring us down to basically 435 basis points. The tax certiorari change to the tax levy would be 88 basis points. So if we did nothing, we have an 88 basis point increase in tax levy, or our taxes go up 88 basis points. We tack the 88 on to 435, and we come out at 523. There was a desire to come in under 5%. So the way we could come in under 5% is if we go to the contingency line, which is a somewhat of a catch-all for things that we
Right.
have. And if we reduce that line by 56,000,
Well, I see it's budgeted at 100,000, I'm sorry, $131,769, and we're going to cut it to 75,000 even.
okay, so we would make it $75,000 even. And if we did that, that would drop the number down roughly to just under 5%.
4.87, something like that?
4.87 was the number I came out with. And so, now, the number is not going to be exact, it's an estimate, because the certiorarities between now and the end of the year can come in and alter that number by the time the final tax roll is established by the town, which is what happened last year. So that number, it's not going to be any lower, because nobody's building anything. It'll be higher. So no one's building enough to change the tax base of the town. So that's where we are. So that was the full discussion we had in a nutshell. So, John, are you comfortable with what do the new numbers look like for the budget? What are your new projected budget numbers and percentage changes, and then we'll see if we can move forward.
Tax increase year-over-year is $637,000.
John, they can't hear you at home. Can you go to the
Oh,
microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Year
They can hear you now.
over-year, the tax increase goes from $694,095 down to $637,326, and it goes down to a tax levy increase of 3.99. And I do agree with Mr. Wolf, you got to put it in the worksheet and this was done on a calculator, so. But the rough number is 3.99, if I'm correct.
And what would be the total, what we care about is what is the total budget number that we're going to be approving a budget on of, because the percentages are the percentages. It's the final budget that you really, we had a number before of, we had a number when we walked in the room of $16,816,156.
That would come down.
No, we didn't either. Hold on. What am I reading? 882. Oh, this is the old, this is the revised.
That one.
Yeah, it would be, this would be revised minus whatever the 56,000 is. I need my calculator back. So John, on your spreadsheet, with the discussion we had earlier, our new budget would be, if we did the, where were we? I'm looking for the, no, that's not this one. Here we go. We started out, I have to double check myself. We started out with 16,882,156.
Correct, that was proposed.
16,882,156. Then we were proposing to take $66,000 or something off of that. 66,000. And then we wanted to slice another
56.
I don't have the, anybody have that number in the calculator?
What do you need?
That $56,000 number. So 56,796. 769. 56,769. Which you get in 967. Would be 122,769. Right, so we're taking 122,769 off the, off this number. So you get how about 16,759,387?
I got 587, but I might have a bad number. It's 769, I changed the contingency. Is it 56,569 or 769?
It's 56,769.
Okay, then I agree with you.
Can you just give your calculator for a second, and I'll just double check it? Yeah, I got your, well, no, I don't either. 16. Yeah, so you get, the new budget would look like 16,759,387. 16,759,387. $16,759,387. $16,759,387. I'm dyslexic, I invert numbers all the time, so good luck. Right?
You want me to do it now?
Here, you got 182 minus 150. You're taking off 150 grand out of the budget, right? So that's what you end up with.
16,500. Yeah.
Okay? So, and that'll be just under a 4%, just under a 5% tax levy with the cert. Okay. Do I have a motion to close the public hearing
I'll make
today?
the motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, you want
Make a motion to close.
second?
I made the motion, he's second.
I'll second.
Okay, so you got Richie.
Nobody else wanted to speak, right?
Nobody else wanted to speak. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So now we have some, who likes to read legal verbiage?
Give it a hit.
Okay. See where it says tax override? That's where we're at.
Oh, we gotta fill in the amounts.
So we're going to offer out we need to have a motion to override the,
Wait a second.
here. No, that's, that's a budget workshop right here. Motion to override the tax cap. Motion to override the tax.
Yeah, but then you have to state how much. All right, you put it in.
Put it already.
Already 1.6 CPI.
Is that the right?
Yeah, it is
Those are right
1.6 of
numbers.
CPI.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, the copies of this motion are available up front if anybody hasn't seen them already. There's just a straight motion that was circulated by our council. So we need a motion to override the tax cap.
You want me to read it first? then?
Oh, you can read the motion and we'll
Make
look for it. Okay.
Resolution of the Board of Fire Commissioners override real property tax cap. Whereas the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Eastchester Fire District must adopt the proposed budget for 2014 and estimate of fund balances in preparation for the annual fire district budget hearing, and did so in preparation for the budget hearing. And whereas the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Eastchester Fire District held the annual fire district budget hearing on notice to the public on October 15, 2013, and whereas the board has considered the proposed budget and comments received on the proposed budget on October 15, 2013 at said budget hearing, and whereas the board has determined that the financial needs of the fire district and Eastchester Fire Department for the fiscal year 2014 cannot be supported by a budget that would comply with the real property tax cap established pursuant to Section 3-C of the General Municipal Law, as the proposed budget for 2014 calls for a real property tax levy that will exceed the real property tax cap, permitting only a 1.66 increase in said tax levy, and Whereas Section 3-C of the General Municipal Law provides as follows: a local government may adopt a budget that requires a tax levy that is greater than the tax levy limit for the coming fiscal year, not including any levy necessary to support the expenditures pursuant to subparagraphs subparagraphs little Roman numeral 1 through little Roman numeral 4 of paragraph G of subdivision 2 of this section, only if the governing body of such local government first enacts by a vote of 60% of the total voting power of such body a local law to override such limit for such coming fiscal year only, or in the case of a district or fire district, a resolution approved by a vote of 60% of the total voting power of such body to override such limit for the coming fiscal year only. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Eastchester Board of Fire Commissioners hereby approves a determination to override the real property tax cap for the 2014 budget only in order to permit an annual real property tax levy that will exceed the real property tax cap, permitting only a 1.66 increase in said tax levy, and result in a final annual fire district budget in the amount of $16,759,387.
Okay, so somebody want to make
I
Make that
motion to pass this
I make that
resolution.
motion.
Okay, you're going to make that motion? And seconded by Commissioner Commissioner Napolitano?
Second it?
Okay. And I'll roll call the board. So it's Richie, Stiegelman, Jerry, Napolitano. So, Commissioner Stiegelman?
Yes.
All right. Commissioner O'Hare? Is that an aye, Jerry? Okay. Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
Commissioner Napolitano?
Aye.
And Commissioner Winters, aye. Okay, so that's passed. So now, we'll have a motion to approve the final budget. And then we have more reading. Who would like? You did such a good job.
See, that's the problem. If you do a good job, it's like doing it ever.
Invite you back.
Yeah, right, new guy.
So you get for being late.
That's what happens when you come in late.
Right. It wasn't my fault my transmission blew up. All right.
Yeah, that's it.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Could I please read this? Resolution of the Board of Fire Commissioners approved final budget for 2014. Whereas the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Eastchester Fire District must adopt a proposed budget for 2014, an estimate of fund balances in preparation for the annual Fire District budget hearing, and did so in preparation for the budget hearing. And whereas the Board of Fire Commissioners of the Eastchester Fire District held the annual Fire District budget hearing on notice to the public on October 15, 2013, and whereas the Board has considered the proposed budget and comments received on the proposed budget on October 15, 2013 at said budget hearing, and whereas the Board has determined that the financial needs of the Fire District and Fire Department for fiscal year 2014 cannot be supported by a budget that would comply with the real property tax cap established pursuant to Section 3-C of the General Municipal Law as the proposed budget for 2014 calls for a real property tax levy that will exceed the real property tax cap, permitting only a 1.66% increase in said tax levy, and whereas Section 3-C of the General Municipal Law provides as follows: a local government may adopt a budget that requires a tax levy that is greater than the tax levy limit for the coming fiscal year, not including any levy necessary to support the expenditures pursuant to subparagraphs little Roman numeral 1 through little Roman numeral 4 of paragraph G of subdivision 2 of this section, only if the governing body of such local government first enacts by a vote of 60% of the total voting power of such body a local law to override such limit for such coming fiscal year only, or in the case of a district or fire district, a resolution approved by a vote of 60% of the total voting power of such body to override such limit for such coming fiscal year only. Whereas previously at this resolution, this Board of Fire Commissioners passed a resolution, I think they meant this meeting, whereas previously at this meeting, this Board of Fire Commissioners passed a resolution to override the real property tax cap for the 2014 budget. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Eastchester Board of Fire Commissioners hereby approves the final budget of the Eastchester Fire District for 2014, attached hereto and made a part hereof, in the amount of $16,759,387.
Okay, so do I have somebody who wants to make a make that motion?
I would make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have Richie Stiegelman and Mr. Baker, since he read it. Stephen Baker first, second. I'll do a road call again. Commissioner Stiegelman?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Hare?
Aye.
Commissioner Napolitano?
Aye.
Commissioner Baker?
Aye.
And Commissioner Winter, aye. Okay, so now, I look for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second? Okay, so we're going to adjourn this meeting and then come right back to our regular monthly meeting, and we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay? Thank you.